In this video, we're going to do a quick start for the SimplSeps Overprint, an all-new plugin from AdvancedTshirts.com for CorelDRAW X5 and X6. Overprints in SimplSeps is something unlike anything we've ever had available to us before in the screen printing market, yet very powerful automation to enable us to get the most out of the limited spot colors that we work with as screen printers. We know that 80% or more of the time we're really working with jobs that are 1, 2, 3, or 4 color prints when we're screen printing on apparel. Now, very often in the past when we've looked at color, we've said, well, we can print some tints of this and that and do some things, but now we've gotten to the place where we've been able to really leverage overprinting. And what is overprinting? Overprinting is really the blending of colors to make additional colors. We can see here I've got set up on the screen the actual Overprints plugin, and we can see a couple of different tabs here. Here is our Color Management tab, here is our Overprint Conversion tab, and here is our Palette Manager. So now we can make overprinted palettes, do conversions with them, and save them and create our own library. Let's say you've got a high school and their colors are black, red, and yellow. You could create a palette for them and then open that and work with that while you're doing their designs, knowing all the colors that you have available based on using the 3 colors that that school or organization would typically be using. To get started here, I want to take a look at the fundamentals of overprinting in color. I've set up a very simple color wheel here on the screen, actually in my document in CorelDRAW, working with just the 3 primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. And then I've added some black going in here towards the center, as you can see, to represent the shades when we bring the black in, and we've got some tints or whiteness fading out here at the end. Now you'll notice here where the red starts to blend into the yellow and we add in that black, we start to get a lot of different tints and shades of color that we can work with. We get some browns down here, we get some flesh tones up in here, and of course we've got our red and our yellow. Now, what is the process of overprinting? And we'll go ahead and take a look at that here briefly. Overprinting is the process of setting up colors so that they overprint on each other. They are not separated. If you want to be able to preview your overprints, you'll have to go to View and select Simulate Overprints. I'll go ahead and turn that on, and I'm going to hit Control-Z here, and we'll bring this back. And now we can see some changes here in these vector objects that I have. Here I have a object set to overprint that's filled with 35% Pantone 1788C. Here I have a yellow rectangle that's filled with 100% Pantone yellow 012C. Now if you were overprinting this, you'd print the red on top of the yellow. Here we've got some black. Now here we have just 3 colors, but here we can see we've got brown, orange, here we've got yellow, here we've got red, here we've got black over the orange, creating a darker look. It's not over the orange, just over the orange here, creating the brown, but also over here over the red and the yellow, creating different colors. Now the way these work, I'll hit Control-Z, is what we do is we actually print them right on top of each other. And here's some halftones that we set up with SimplSeps Raster, and you can see that these dots are going right on top of the yellow, or we could have a lower density or halftone pattern for the red to get a lighter orange. But you can see how that creates the look of the orange to the eye, the illusion. As we zoom out, and you can see here's one that I actually set up as an RGB, you can see how close the color representation is. And this was actually converted to an RGB, and you can see what would happen or simulate what the colors would look like in a screen print. Now this is just to show you the basics of the objects and how they work. And we've got all these set to our right click, and you can see they're set to Overprint Fill. If I turn that off, all I'm going to see is my solid colors. If I right click and select Overprint Fill, I'm going to see that. Now when I separate that, what's going to happen is these won't be separated. They'll all be set up to print on top of each other. And that's how you're going to get that look through those halftones. So you can see we get a lot of different colors just working with the primary colors and adding some black, usually going with 2 or 3 colors. SimplSeps Overprint will do a max of a 3-color overprint palette. Here on page 2, I've got a graphic that I built representing 6 different colors and black. And the colors are yellow, red, we've got magenta here, we've got blue coming over into cyan and then green. Now you can see here where the red and the yellow are blending, we get some nice flesh tones up in here, also down here. And then we start to get some browns in here. We also get some oranges. The fact is there is no orange in this graphic. These are overprints, blends of red and yellow. And we want to be aware of this when we're working with vector designs, even simple ones, because we can do things with color, working with overprinting, that we're usually not thinking about. We're usually not thinking in overprinting. Now with overprinting, we can actually think about it and start to look at these graphics based on what we can really do with the colors. And that's going to give us 2 distinct advantages. The first one's going to be if a client walks in with supplied art and you can look at that art and you understand overprinting, you understand the basics of color, you can say, well, even though it looks like it's a 6-color job, based on the colors that are in here, I can actually do this as a 3-color print. Now that's going to give you a distinct advantage in the bidding process, especially if you're competing with somebody down the street who's not aware of overprinting and saying, well, it's a 6-color job, and he's going to bid as a 6-color job. You're going to come in and bid as a 3-color job because you're going to use overprinting, explain to the client how that works, how they can save money. You can see the advantage you're going to get there, and at the same time, you can generate these overprinting palettes to actually do your design work. So when you're designing for your clients, even with limited spot colors, you're going to be able to determine what colors you can mix into that design to give it more color and pop. So a very powerful form of printing that's been overlooked really in the industry for a number of years, and now with the introduction of the SimplSeps Overprint, anybody who's got CorelDRAW X5 or X6 can start to work in this way. I'm going to take a look at another graphic here on page 3. And this is the Lumberjack Football design. Here is set up as a 16-color RGB mix of colors, CMYK, etc. Now we know we can't screen print this, we got to get this down in colors. Now we can also bring it down to 5 Pantone colors, 16 tints, and use the light reds to have the skin use one of the browns at various tints. But we're still going to lose some of the integrity of what really was intended for the flesh tone. However, beneath this I have an overprint. Now here's the benefit of this. I've got this down, if I was printing on, say, a white, to just 3 colors, because white is one of the colors, but I've got a better looking flesh and a better representation of the brown colors than just using a single spot color to do that with halftones. So here again, here's your benefit, is that you've got better representation of color, better options relating to your color, and the ability to print with less colors. Let's go ahead and take a look at how SimplSeps Overprint works. And here I've got that graphic from the RGB setup. First thing we want to realize about SimplSeps, if we're just designing with an overprint palette in a document, that's fine. But when we want to start going into actual conversions, we want to bring it into its own page. This is a very complicated process with a lot of processing. First thing I'll do is I'll just go ahead and copy this, Control-C, and I'll create a new document. Go ahead and change this to a landscape. I'll hit Control-V to paste that in. Now the first thing I'm going to do is keep a copy of my original just so that I've got one here. So I'm going to go ahead, right click here, and I'll go ahead and go to Duplicate Page. I'm going to select to copy layer and copy layers and their contents, and I'll select OK. Now here I'm going to go ahead and select everything here in my graphic. I'm going to go to Advanced Tools, and I'm going to go to SimplSeps Overprint, and that's going to open up. Now I'm going to start in the Color Management tab. First thing I'm going to do is create a selection palette so I can analyze how many colors I'm dealing with. And I've got 16 colors. Well, the fact is, all I'm going to need is I'm just going to need this golden yellow, I'm going to need this red, I'm going to need a white, I'm going to need a black, and I'm going to keep these 3 browns because I'm going to replace those with blends. And I just simply come down here to one-click conversion, let that process, and now I'm down to 7 colors and 7 tints. Now I'm looking at here, and I'm looking at this color, and it looks like a kind of off color. I want to click on Show Color Names and see what kind of conversion we got here. Now that may have been a bit of an off color. This 7510 came from this brown and was used to be replaced there. I'm actually going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to go to Select Objects, and I'm just going to fill that with a Pantone Trans White right there, just so that I don't have that extra tint in there, because I don't like that tint color, and that doesn't look like the Pantone Trans White that would be here in his undershirt or his collar. So you can see the power of that. I was able to find out where that object was and change that color very easily. Now if I go ahead and select everything here, and I'll run this again, create selection palette, there we go. Now we're down to 7 colors and 12 tints, and I got rid of that kind of off color there. Now we have to go to Pantone colors before we can go to overprinting. So once that's done, now here we are with 7 colors. Now we're going to go down to 4 colors. I'm going to go to my overprint conversion. I'm going to create another selection palette. Now these are the colors that I'm going to generate my overprinting with. Now of course, if you wanted to use other colors, you could go ahead and make rectangles and squares or whatever and fill them with whatever color you want and bring those in here also when you create the selection palette, and then create your overprinting palettes from that. But the first thing we want to do is create an overprinting palette. Now we know we need to use this golden yellow as a solid color. We want that for our text, and the same as the red, basically the school colors or what have you. I'll take my golden yellow, I'll select that, I'll select my red, and then I'll select my black. And I'll simply come over here and I'll click on Generate Overprint Palette, and we'll let that start processing. Now you'll see this overprint palette will start to process here, and you can see the colors changing. It's going through creating mixes or blends of those overprinted colors that'll give us a color palette with about 500, 600, or 700 colors that we can work with to match the colors in our lumberjack design and bring this down to what would be 3 colors on a white. Or if you were printing the white and the white base, you'd have a 5-color design, but yet it'll still look like it had all of the flesh tones and browns and everything in the original design. Now this is going to take about 3 to 5 minutes to process all of these different colors for this palette. It's a huge palette, but once it's done, we'll go ahead and save that, because after I do something like this, I'll usually save the palette just in case I need to open it back up. But we'll go ahead and let this process, and then we'll continue after we let this overprinting palette process. Now once that's finished processing, what we'll have here is an overprint palette, and we'll start here with the color blends at the top. Here at the top we have the blend of the red and the yellow, and we can see we get some flesh tones in here in different oranges. Here we have the blend of the black and the yellow, then we have the blend of the black to the red with different tints of red mixed with black. Then coming down through here we have all of the different color tints and shades coming from the 3-color blend of red, yellow, and black. So we get some dark reds, we get some oranges, and we get some browns down here, and some off yellow colors. Here at the bottom of the palette you will find the continuation of the same, and then we'll find the tints of the actual spot colors used in the creation of the palette. And here's the 3 colors. Here's the golden yellow, here's the red, here's the black, and from these tints and shades we got all of these different colors to work with in this design, even though we're going to be working with just 3 colors. Now the first thing I like to do after I generate an overprint palette, specifically a 3-color palette, is go ahead and save that. So I'll go here, type in the name for the palette, and I'll just call this Lumberjacks, and I'll call it red, yellow, black. Now this way, if I close the palette accidentally or anything like that, I'll be able to pull it right back up, import it, and start using it. I'll go ahead and click Save here. And I've saved the palette, and you'll see it here in the palette list. Now I could also delete it, and I could also select the palette and import that palette into the workspace. But now that we're working here, we've got our palette set up and we're ready to go. I want to go back to color management. The way I prefer to work with this is I like to actually kind of zoom in on the design. And I want to zoom in over here just a bit, like right about there. I'm not going to need this palette, so I'll just take this out of the workspace here. And I'm going to go up here to object selection. I'm going to change it to current page because I'm working on a page. I've got this page 2, but what I want to do now, this is my first Pantone page. I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate the page now. Duplicate page. I'm going to copy the layers and contents. Now this is the 3rd page where I'm going to do my overprinting conversions, but I'm going to do them by eye. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and click off Show Color Names here, and I'm going to go here. We're going to get a pick tool and go ahead and select everything here and create a selection palette here. Now I've got that set up. Now I'm going to go select by page. I'll set that here. I'll go by fills only because I'm only working with fills. The first color I want to replace is the kind of yellowish brown in the shirt, and I know that's right here. I'll go ahead and select this, and I'm just going to go over here and click on Select Objects. I selected 5 objects. Now I've selected every object that has that fill color, and now I can go to my overprint palette, take a look at that, and select, say, this color here, and put that in. I can see it's going to be way too dark. I'll hit Control Z to go back, and I want to make sure and it looks like we got a bug in here in Corel. I must have had a keyboard held down. There we go. Now sometimes if you hold down a key and click a palette you'll get that warning, but I must have been holding down the wrong key. I'm going to go ahead to say this color here, click that, and I can see that that's really close. I'm going to hit Control Z again, come down here to say this color. That's kind of close. I'm going to hit Control Z. Let's take a look at this here. And we'll hit Control Z and we'll go back and forth. What about this one? Control Z. That's a little bit too dark. And I think that's going to be the color I want. So I'm going to go ahead and select all the objects again here. And we'll go ahead here. You can see we're right there. And that's really close. And that'll be fine for me as far as the color replacement for that. Now I've just changed that brown to a blend of red, yellow, and black. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and click off here. I'll select this brown, current page, select objects. I'll get 9 objects, and this is going to be a little bit of a darker brown, something like here maybe, and that's actually too dark. I'll hit Control Z 2 times, come back to say something like this here, and that'll work just fine. Now I know the pants are here. I'm going to change these pants to a darker brown which will be probably something like what's up here. That's a little too dark. That looks good. I'm going to Control Z 3 times to go back to the original. Click here, and we're very close there also. Looks like we might actually have something that's more like here. Control Z. No, maybe I'll come down here a little bit and look at some of the other blends down here. Let's take a look at something like this. That's very close. That's very close. And that's really good right there. So now I've changed all of that brown to Overprint blends. Those 3 brown colors. Now what I want to do is I'm going to replace my flesh here. So I'll come here. I'll just highlight this, select all objects. Now looking at this palette, I know I'm going to have flesh colors up here where my red and yellow were blended. And you can see that that's kind of a flesh color, but that looks much more like a flesh than the original. I'll hit Control Z to go back 2 times. There's the tint of just the red. There's the flesh color, and you can see that's going to look much more like a flesh. Go up here to the Color Management tab again. I'll go to that darker tint of red that we're going to use for the shading on the flesh. I'll select all those objects. I'll get 6 objects there also. And then I'll come here to say this color here, and that'll look much more like a flesh also. So now what I've done is I've replaced my flesh with overprinting and all of my browns with overprinting, but I've kept my solid yellow, red, and black, except for the tints in black that'll be carried as the tints of the actual black in the graphic with the palette that was created initially. Now looking at this again, what I want to do is just do some evaluation here from a color management standpoint so you can see what's going to happen. Go ahead and select everything on the page here. I'm going to create a selection palette. Now you can see we got 9 colors coming off of this. But watch what happens when I come over here to the Overprint conversion and I click on Generate Overprint Design. Now what this is going to do is going to create all of these overprints in a new page called Overprint Design. Go ahead and click this and we'll let this process. And this will take just a minute to go through and process. There's 63 objects there. It's going to create a whole bunch of different objects, and I want to show you a few things here. Now here's my overprint design, and I can verify that just by clicking on one of these objects. You can see there is the red, the black, and the yellow here. Now these are all set up to go on top of white objects. So actually the first thing we do is we create a white object with no overprint, then we copy and paste our overprinted color values directly on top of that object. The reason being because if there's other colors behind the overprinted colors, it's going to pick them up. So we need that white background. You'll notice that'll happen every place that you've done an overprint. You can see that white back there, and that's actually an object. I'll hit Control Z and we'll go back. Right there. Now if we take a look at this at this point in time and select everything here and create a selection palette, we'll see that we're now down to 4 colors. If we weren't printing on a dark garment, we wouldn't need the white. If we were printing on a white garment, we'd be able to print this with the look of all of these colors with just 3 colors. Now one thing we want to be aware of, because we're working with overprinting, if we try to do a separation of the Pantone white here, because of all these overprints here, all that white we're using is going to show up in that white color separation. And that's why we have back here saved a copy of our original Pantone that we could pull our white color separation from. Now this is set up. What I'm going to do is show you how we would color separate this and how we could preview it in a halftone form working directly in CorelDRAW with SimplSeps. I'm not going to need the SimplSeps overprint anymore now that I've gone ahead and run this. I have saved my palette here, as you can see. Now as you go through these tabs, we turn off the simulated color management so that you can tell where you have simulated color management, where you have overprints and simulating them and wanting to know where they are, where they're located in the design. But if you go here, they'll turn back on. Now if you go to color management and you want to see the look as if it was simulating overprint, you just go to View and Simulate Overprints, and that'll turn that back on. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and minimize this. We're not going to need this anymore. I'm going to go to Advanced Tools, and I'm going to go to SimplSeps 3. And I'm going to go ahead and print the halftones for this just so you can see how I would do that. Now I'm going to go to Separations. I know my colors are all set up. I'm going to go to Halftones. And we can see here we've got our black, our red, our yellow, and our white. Our white I'm not going to worry about because we're not going to use that. Here I've got my red. I'm going to change that to 65. I'm going to change the black to 65 LPI, and I'm going to change the yellow to 65 LPI. Now, going through this, I'm going to change my angles at 30-degree increments for my different colors, and it's kind of like process printing, but we'll see how it go from the lightest at 22.5, we'll go to 52.5 for the red, and we'll go to 82.5 for the black. Now if I want to set up for my all black printing, if I had all black ink in my ink cartridges, I could go to all black here, but I'm not going to bother with that for this particular session. I'm going to do at this point is just click on Generate Separations. I'll get a couple of warnings here, and then we'll process this to actual halftones and take a look at what happens. Now once that's finished processing, we can see here our Pantone Trans White, and you can see that every place where we had the overprinting, the white came through, and that's the correct way for this to be done with overprinting, but this would not be the Pantone Trans White color separation that we would want. We would just want the color. We'll go ahead and delete this for now, and I'll go ahead and delete that page. And here would be our golden yellow. I can minimize this and we'll change that to the golden yellow. Go one more page. Here would be our black. Going one more page. Here would be our red, and I'll go ahead and right click and change that. Now these come in as monochrome bitmaps, so you can actually copy this, and then we'll go back a couple of pages and bring that into our yellow and hit paste. Now you can see the foundation of the orange and the flesh is starting to be put together, and we can see the halftone dots here that would create that color. Now we can tell her that the yellow is very strong, but the red is not very strong. So we're probably, when we print this printer, so print order is going to be yellow first, then red. Because if I take, right click here and go order to back of page with the red, we can see that the yellow starts to really overpower our blend, and we don't want that. I'll hit Control Z. Let's go ahead and bring our black in. I'll go here to the black hexachrome page. I can copy that, and we can bring that back in and take that, and we'll just paste that in. And now we can see how our color is being created as halftones with the illusion of color through the blends. And we can see the lighter brown here, the darker brown here, we can see the flesh tones and the pants here, etc. Now the way Corel renders these in halftones, it doesn't really look that good, but when you print them out, they'll look that fine. It's just the way monochrome is rendered, as you can see there. Now looking at this, I know that these steps are all going to be fine. I'll go ahead and get me a copy of this. I'll hit Control C here. I'm just going to hit Control Z and undo back to everything set up here. We're on the Pantone Trans White page. I'll go ahead and delete all of this, and I'm not going to need these registration marks, and I'll go ahead and hit Control V and paste that in. And that's kind of my halftone preview, I guess you could say there. Now here I've got my different steps here. Now here I've got my backups. Here's my overprint design. Here is my design set up as the RGBs before it's converted to an overprint. And then here on page 2 is my Pantone. Now from here, I would actually want to create my white base and white highlight, because it will come out correctly with the overprints. So I can go back to my SimplSeps 3 here and go to separations, and I can go to halftones, which I don't really need to. I won't need these three here. I want to go ahead and bring this down here, and this is actually before we converted to the 7 colors and we still had those browns in for replacement. I'm going to go ahead, and here I would just generate my white underbase if I needed one, and if I wanted to choke it, I could do that also. We could do that at 65, and I'm only going to need my Pantone Trans White here, and I'll want this to be at 65, but it's just going to be a solid white, so it's really not going to be that important because I know there's no halftones in any of the white. And then from here I could go ahead and generate these separations, and then just copy my white base and my white highlight into position for the other sets of separations. Now we have to pay attention when we're working with halftones. There's a little bit of trickiness to it, but once we understand how to work with it, we can see that we'll be able to create very nice looking multi-color designs based on working with just a few spot colors. I'm going to take this and go to bitmaps, convert to bitmaps, RGB anti-aliasing 300 dpi, select OK, just so we get a better preview of it. The halftone rendering doesn't look very good. It doesn't look as smooth as it would look on an actual garment or a screen print. And this is a fairly big object, so it'll take just a minute to process it at 300 dpi. And we'll get a better preview of our halftone overprint vector lumberjack design coming out of the SimplSeps Overprint. And there you can see how your screen print would look, and you can zoom in and review what's going on with your dots, etc. And you can see the blends here. The red's a little bit stronger here, making the shading. The flesh looks quite a bit better than just having the tint of the red there, but actually having the yellow in there also. So we'll go ahead and wrap here. This is just a quick introduction on how to use the SimplSeps Overprint, and we'll continue in our next session.